Hi, Black Russian Terrier breeders. This is Rebecca at Better Breed, and today I'm going to show you a test breeding. Now, I'm going to go up here to Dog Search to search for the dog or the bitch I'm going to use in this test breeding. So you can search just a partial part of the name. So I'm just going to search Midnight Solo, because that's the first part of her name, and that'll pull up all dogs in our database with that name. Now, if I butcher any names of your dogs, my apologies. I'm not always the best at pronouncing everything. So here I'm going to Midnight Solo Haviva de Sagres. I'm going to click on her, and that's going to take us to her profile. So we're going to go through her profile, and I'm going to discuss all the values in our database and what they mean. So you click on each one of these little expandable menus to see this is her generic information, sire and dam. If you go up here to genetic relationships, this will pull up breeding or a list that'll compare her to all of the other Black Russian Terriers in the database, be they male or female. So you can see who's the closest related to her in the database. Okay, going down here to genetics, this is all of our measurements in our database that we use when we're considering breeding. So here she has the most common DLA type here is 2033 and 1091, 2033 and 1091. This is, I believe, over 50% of the tested DLA types in your population, so it's the most common. And now that doesn't necessarily mean bad or good. It just means that you guys kind of have a bottleneck around this specific DLA haplotype. Now, just because they're numbers does not mean this changes from generation to generation. This is a set of genes in the class 2 DLA that transfers together, and this is a set of genes in the class 1 DLA that transfers together. So 50% of the puppies will inherit these two, and 50% will inherit these two, and these generally all travel together. So you'll usually see 2060 paired with 1160 and 2033 paired with 1091. They won't doesn't trade around like a deck of cards. Okay, now the next measurements that we're going to discuss, these change from generation to generation. These are about your individual dog. Outlier index is a number that tells you how typical or atypical your dog is for the tested population. Now, why would we want atypical genetics? When there's a bottleneck in a population, we tend to get more and more typical genes that most dogs carry, or one or two that are most carried by most dogs at each allele. And then if a dog has very different genetics, then they're atypical. And those different genes don't necessarily mean they're bad. They're just underrepresented in your population. And when they become underrepresented, they're more easily lost. And then you start moving towards a bottleneck, which will start to concentrate genes, and those also tend to concentrate breed-specific diseases. So we encourage breeders to keep your outlier index as a breed up, because that will help prevent any bottlenecks and help keep the breed healthy in the long run. Okay, so she's right a little bit below your breed average for that. Average genetic relatedness will really change. We don't have a lot of dogs in our database right now, so this is based on how closely related your dog is to other dogs in the database. She's right around what's breed average right now, but will really change as more Black Russian Terriers are added. Then the lower that is, kind of, I call this the breeding option. The more breeding options you will have. If you have a low AGR, you're more unrelated. IR, this is your inbreeding measurement. The higher this number is, the more inbred. So she is less inbred than is typical for your breed. You want to breed, what we say in our test breedings is you want to try to shoot for test breedings IR at or below 0. So the more negative, the more outbred your puppies. HL, homozygosity by loci, is another inbreeding measurement. She's right around breed average for that, a little bit below, and then she's unrelated to 41.67% of the population. Now, had these points been updated, you could get health information, so like any OFA information, health tests would go here. You can do temperament, and of course she's black. Okay, so I'm going up here. Now, if you can add photos if you go up here to my account, you'll see that we've got my dogs. If you go to my dogs, you can upload photos as long as you're doing the Black Russian Terrier trial. You can add a photo. Now, I'm going to breeding tools, and this gives you all the breeding options that we have. Here you can compare her one-on-one with other dogs, and this tool is always free for all breeders. These up here are for our breeding software, so you have to have a full membership to use that. I'm going to use potential breedings by genetic value to the breed because we like to place emphasis on OI so that you are keeping your breed's genetic diversity well distributed. AGR would sort by dogs that are less related to the rest of the population in our database. And then this one just sorts by genetic distance. And I'm going to talk about the genetic distance, the genetic relationships once we get to this next page. Okay, so here you see we have these things called categories, and these are based on your genetic relationships with other dogs, how closely related they are. If we went down to category 1, this would be an identical twin, which we hear has happened, but we never had one in our database. And then category 2 will be siblings or parent to offsprings. And then 3, you have 3/4 siblings or sibling cousins, so on and so forth. So we usually recommend category 6 or above, just because the higher or the lower you get, the closer your inbreeding will be, obviously. And this is based on your genetic results. So I'm going to go up here to category 10. This will be the least related, and it's sorting by outlier index. So the breeding that they would like to consider doing is to champion midnight riders, motorcycle, cowboy. So these first 3 numbers are his numbers, and then this number here is the genetic relatedness. So how closely related are these two together? I'm going to click here on puppies, and I'm going to go to 3,000 and push breed. And now it's going to simulate the breeding between them. So you have to wait a little while because it's calculating results for 3,000 puppies. But here you can see he's just over your breed average for outlier index. He is a little bit less related to the rest of the population than the rest of the population is to one another. But again, this one's really going to change as more Black Russian Terriers are added. And he's very outbred, a very low IR. Okay, so it's done. I'm going to click on litter summary, and this is going to pull up the summary for the litter. I just prefer this because you get to see the graphs for where puppies will fall within your litters. So here, these are our 2 things that we like to consider. I like to consider your outlier index because remember that will help keep your breed well distributed. And the lower that number gets, the more common genetics the puppies have. And the higher that number gets, the more atypical for your population it gets. So your range here is right around breed average, which is your breed average is pretty good. So that's good. And so we usually recommend at or above breed average for OI. You can see the DLA types the puppies would have just by looking at the sire and dam. Both have the most typical DLA types, but this DLA type, the 2060 and 1160, is actually very uncommon for your populations. It's very underrepresented. So I would consider, if all else is equal when you're looking at puppies, to keep one with this haplotype because it is very atypical for your population. That's been tested so far anyway. Okay, so looking at your IR, your average IR for this litter is below 0, which is what we like to see. And you can see up here, so once you get to 0.15, that is when inbreeding is getting pretty high. And you guys have this potential breeding has very few, so the amount of puppies, if you click on this, it tells you what likely percentage of the litter would have it, the IR of that number, and it's really low. So anything above 0.15 is getting to really high inbreeding levels. And so this, to me, overall looks like a very nice breeding. Of course, we always say that it's important to look at your pedigree risks, your type and temperament, drive, what are your goals for your breedings. Genetic diversity informs upon our breeding decisions to make sure that we're keeping our genetics well distributed and our inbreeding low, but it does not tell us the quality of dogs or whether or not a breeding would be good on anything but paper. So we always want to emphasize that there's more to it than genetic diversity, and we're not trying to take away from any other tools we've ever had. Okay, so now this litter would be under my litters if you want to check, and it will save them. So it'll save those 3,000 tested puppies under my litters. I take screenshots of these summaries to share with people, and you've already seen that in your group. So you can do as many litters as you want when you're on our full trial, and it'll be saved under my litters. All right, well, thanks for watching. Have a good day.